Hey, what's going on everybody? Jay here from SquarePegs, and in my time on the channel, I have reviewed a lot of emulation machines, whether it's ones you hook up to a TV or handheld ones that also have the option to hook up to a TV. I've reviewed quite a few, and today I'm looking at one that was sent to me by the folks from Timex Player. This is the case for the Miyoo Flip. Let's actually get over to the tabletop and take a look at this as we unbox it and take a look at what's inside. First and foremost, thanks to Timex Player for sending this over for review. Now, while they did provide this for review, my thoughts on this handheld are my own, and were not subject to change before being submitted. The only thing they wanted to verify was that I mentioned the discount code that is present on screen as well as in the description below, along with links to the direct Timex Player site as well as to Amazon. But let's dive into the unboxing. The Miyoo Flip features an A55 Cortex 1.8 GHz CPU with a gig of RAM running a Linux OS, and features a 3.5-inch IPS screen. Obviously, its shape and form factor is for the GBA-SP, but there's some notable differences. Right off the bat, the console claims to have up to 7 hours of battery life for the 3000 mAh battery that's chargeable by USB-C. Now, I will admit I haven't experienced that kind of battery life yet, but I'm willing to bet that's probably a best-case scenario that you'd see that length of time, so running things like the 2600 or the NES emulation or utilizing the ebook reader that's on board, that might get you closer to that time frame. Inside the package is a wonderful zip-up hard-sided cloth carrying case that houses the system, and I really dig the SNES-styled controller that's in the zipper pull. And included are a micro SD card that comes preloaded with ROMs, a charging USB-C cable, a screen protector, and an instruction manual. The console itself, as mentioned, is the clamshell GBA-SP-styled machine, and on the outside you have a volume up and down button, a micro SD card slot, an audio jack for wired headphones. This also has Bluetooth support for controllers, a USB-C port for charging, a secondary SD card slot, a power button, L1, L2, R1, and R2 buttons, a secondary USB-C port, and a micro HDMI port. Now, you're going to see some footage in this video of gameplay, and I have to tell you, I wasn't able to utilize the HDMI port on the one that was sent to me as my capture cards just would not recognize the device. None of the three I tried picked up the signal from the handheld, which is why you're only going to see the footage I have. So, your mileage might vary, but be aware that I did have some hardware problems with it regarding the HDMI out. Everything else worked great, but that I just couldn't make work. When the machine's opened up, you have the aforementioned 3.5-inch IPS screen, an SNES-styled ABXY button layout, a D-pad, select, start, and dual analog sticks that sit recessed into the housing for the machine. They're clickable as well, so you get an L3 and R3 button press. But I won't lie, I was a bit concerned at first because I didn't think they'd feel great, but honestly they're not that bad. There's also a menu button, which is the black button in the middle just below the hinge that can be typically used to exit gameplay and return to the menu. I say typically because there are some games that I've had problems with, or more appropriately, there's some systems I've had problems with where the menu button just doesn't exit me out. Once the system is powered on, the system software is Linux-based, as I mentioned, and it has the standard options you'd expect from an emulator. Recently played games, favorites, a generic game menu which shows the different platforms on board, a RetroArch option to run games through that, apps, and the settings for the device. Out of the box, the systems supported by the console under the games menu are arcade emulation, the Atari Lynx, Atari 7800, Dreamcast, DOS, Easy RPG, Final Burn Neo, Famicom or NES, Game & Watch, Game Gear, Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, MAME Plus, Mega Drive or Genesis, MPV, the Master System, Mugen, N64, NDS, NeoGeo, NeoGeo Pocket and NeoGeo Pocket Color, ONS, Open Beats of Rage, PC Engine, PGM2, Pico 8, the PSP, PlayStation, Portage 32, Saturn, Super Famicom and Super NES, and the WonderSwan Color. Now, I'm not going to test drive every single emulation option here, but I wanted to bounce into a few, and we're going to start in the arcades with Dungeons & Dragons Shadow over Mystara, a classic blend of beat 'em up and RPG from Capcom. Gameplay-wise, this thing is silky smooth and it feels excellent. The overall experience was really fantastic. What can't be understated as well is how loud the speaker on the handheld is. It's a noticeably rich sound that feels great. I was impressed by how solidly this performed, and it was really nice to be able to play one of my favorite arcade games in the palm of my hand. I mean, sure, It's not a terribly overall involved game, but still really fun. But I did want to try something that was a bit more involved and had a bit more firepower behind it, or horsepower needed to process it. So staying in the arcade section, I bounced into Street Fighter III Third Strike, one of the most visually striking fighting games in the Street Fighter family. The fluid animations and the solid fighting gameplay are represented incredibly well here, with all face and shoulder buttons fully engaged and being used. The game looks and runs incredibly well, though I will say that looking at the footage, it does feel like there's a little bit of image ghosting as it runs, but that might just be my camera recording at a slightly different frame rate than what the console was outputting. But overall, I'm really, really impressed. This is a solid experience. Jumped over next to one of my favorite all-time consoles, the Dreamcast, and while Dreamcast emulation has been fairly reliable for a few years now, I still wanted to take it out for a spin because, I mean, Crazy Taxi in the palm of my hand? Yes, please. BD Joe and I successfully drove the streets of San Francisco and made our fares, with the only real problems being some stutters in gameplay happening as the ROM was launched. It was a bit concerning, but once the system felt like it caught up, for lack of a better term, everything ran beautifully well, and it was great to hear the offspring blaring out of my speakers. On the NeoGeo, I booted up Super Baseball 2020, an arcade baseball title that I really enjoy, and kind of like the Dreamcast, NeoGeo emulation has been really well run for a few years now, but since the system is still fairly powerful, I wanted to see how this one performed. And while I played terribly when I was playing the game, that wasn't a fault of the console. The gameplay was solid, fun, and it looked and sounded excellent. If you haven't played this one, this is a spectacular arcade baseball game that I think a lot of people might have overlooked if they ever saw it available to play on a multi-cart NeoGeo machine. Check it out if you haven't done so. I will say one of the most impressive emulation feats to me was the Nintendo 64. I have used a lot of emulation machines that have attempted to run N64 games, and all of them have said that it runs flawlessly, and each and every one of them has fallen short. And at first, I'm not going to lie to you, I was concerned the Flip was going to be the same way. There was some severe choppiness when launching into Mario Kart 64, but after those initial few seconds of the race, it was running beautifully. I also had the same experience with Mario 64. Now, with all that said, this is a perfect world environment. Like I mentioned, these are preloaded games for a reason and are featured for a reason. There are some other ROMs that I've dropped on that haven't performed as well or even launched, so your mileage may vary, but changing up the OS and adding different BIOS options might make things run better. The final system I'm going to test is the Sega Saturn because it's the golden goose of emulation. I've only had one machine ever run Saturn games even kind of well, but I am ecstatic to say that the Flip doubles that number to 2. And this doesn't just run it kind of well. Guardian Heroes ran flawlessly. It ran so ridiculously well. There was no slowdown, no frame skips, no sound interruption, no poor performance whatsoever. I was legitimately shocked at how good it did and how much fun it was to play. Load times are a bit iffy, they take a little bit of time, and I couldn't get the menu button to work on this one. This is one of the systems I was mentioning earlier, so if I wanted to exit, I had to power the system down completely in order to get back to the main menu to play something else, which, I mean, that kind of sucked, but I might just not know the button combination needed to bring the menu up. Overall, impressed with the construction of this console. Is it perfect? No, I've seen some issues here where some stuff, like I said, doesn't launch that I've added onto the console, and while I like the dual analog sticks on the body and on the chassis of the machine itself, it isn't exactly ergonomic. Like, this is one of the biggest problems with anything that tries to use the GBA SP as a frame. You're still running into the fact that that is a small system and we are not kids anymore. Our hands are a lot bigger, so it's a lot harder to hold them. But for the most part, this is an impressive little machine. Let's head back now to the camera for my final thoughts. So overall, I'm really impressed with the Miyoo Flip, at least out of the box. I will say that I have added a few ROMs onto this and they are not performing terribly well, but the ones that come onto the machine itself and the SD card that is provided work, functions really well. I'm fairly impressed. There's some stuff I want to do. There's always ways to update these and change these as you go. You can add different BIOSes, different firmwares and things like that to make it more customizable. And we'll get there eventually with this machine. But right out of the box, it's pretty impressive. And if you're just looking for something to have in your pocket to take handheld gaming with you, like having both analog sticks on there is killer. I think that is amazing. It's actually a big step up on some other handheld emulation devices that I have reviewed on the channel before. So I do really like that. There are some quirks with it there, and you'll find those things out as you go. Like there are certain emulators you won't be able to press the menu button to escape. There are certain key commands you have to put in. And that's just a thing that you have to figure out. It's kind of the case with every single emulation device. It's just kind of how it works. But out of the box, I'm impressed, and I think I'll be even more impressed once I actually tinker with it and change some things up on it. But let me know in the comments down below, if you've checked out the Miyoo Flip, do you like this kind of body style, like in this GBA ASP kind of style? And do you like something that actually includes both analog sticks? I think it makes things significantly better. It improves a lot of gameplay options. Let me know in the comments down below. Until next time, folks, I've been Jay. Appreciate you spending a little bit of time with me. If you enjoyed this video, check the link on screen right now where you can see some other emulation devices I have reviewed. And remember to play more games, stay square, and take care. I'll talk to you soon.